"There's a black boy stealing from children at Riverside Park," Patricia Whitmore said into her phone, her voice sharp enough to cut through the warm Saturday air. The words traveled farther than she meant them to, slipping past the benches, past the maple trees, past the bright red slide where parents had stopped pretending not to listen. 10 yards away, Elijah Brooks stood frozen in the middle of the playground with a pink backpack pressed against his chest and a small blue inhaler in his right hand. He was 12 years old, thin in the shoulders, still wearing his school polo under a faded gray hoodie even though it was nearly 78 degrees outside. His math worksheet had fallen from his notebook and lay open on the grass, the corner trembling whenever the breeze moved across the park. Beside him, a little white girl with blonde pigtails sat on the edge of the rubber play mat, crying in short, frightened breaths that sounded too tight to be ordinary tears. Elijah kept glancing from the girl to the woman on the phone, trying to understand how the moment had turned so fast. Only a minute earlier, he had been sitting beneath the big oak near the walking trail, solving long division problems with a dull pencil while waiting for his grandmother to finish her afternoon shift at Whitmore Laundry 3 blocks away. He had heard the girl coughing near the pond path, seen her drop to one knee, seen her small hands claw at the zipper of her backpack as panic widened her eyes. No adult had noticed. The joggers kept moving. A man with earbuds pushed a stroller past the drinking fountain. Patricia Whitmore, the girl's grandmother, had been standing near the picnic tables with her sunglasses raised in her hair, laughing into another phone call. So Elijah ran. He did not think about rules, or strangers, or how he might look holding someone else's bag. He only remembered his own cousin Marcus, who had asthma so bad that every breath sometimes sounded like paper tearing. He found the inhaler in the front pocket where the girl pointed with shaking fingers. He handed it to her carefully. He told her to sit upright, just like Marcus had been taught. Then Patricia turned around. She saw the backpack. She saw Elijah's black hands holding it. She saw her granddaughter crying, and whatever story she had already carried inside her mind snapped into place before Elijah could speak. Now the park seemed to hold its breath. The swings slowed with soft metallic creaks. A basketball bounced once on the nearby court, and rolled away untouched. Patricia pointed at Elijah as if pointing could make him guilty. "Yes, officer, he's still here," she said louder now, making sure everyone heard. "He has my granddaughter's bag. I need someone here immediately." Elijah swallowed. The inhaler felt cold in his palm. The little girl whispered, "Grandma," but her voice was too small, swallowed by sirens that had not arrived yet and fear that already had. Elijah Brooks had learned early how to make himself small without disappearing completely. At 12 years old, he already knew which benches in Riverside Park stayed shaded after 3 o'clock, which drinking fountain worked, which parents smiled when he helped their children reach a stuck ball, and which ones pulled their kids closer before he had even opened his mouth. He came there almost every weekday after school because the apartment he shared with his grandmother sat on the 3rd floor of an old brick building where the air conditioner rattled more than it cooled, and because the public library had started closing early after budget cuts that nobody in his neighborhood had asked for. Riverside Park was not fancy, but to Elijah it was wide enough to breathe in. The grass smelled sweet after the sprinklers ran. The oak tree near the pond gave him a place to do homework without asking anybody for permission. The ducks moved across the water like little folded boats, and sometimes, when the afternoon light turned gold against the walking trail, he could almost forget how tired his grandmother looked when she came home with swollen fingers from pressing shirts and folding sheets for people who never learned her name. Her name was Ruth Brooks, though everyone at Whitmore Laundry called her Miss Ruth because even strangers could feel the quiet dignity around her. She had raised Elijah since he was 7, after his mother passed away from a heart condition that had hidden itself too well until it was too late. Ruth never had much money, but she had rules. Hold doors open. Say yes, ma'am, and no, sir. Do not take what is not yours. Help when help is needed. And above all, never let someone else's fear decide the shape of your soul. Elijah carried those words the way other kids carried lucky coins. They were with him when classmates laughed at his second-hand sneakers, With him, when store clerks followed him through aisles. With him, when a substitute teacher once asked if he was sure he belonged in the advanced reading group. He did not tell his grandmother every time something happened. She already carried enough. Instead, he kept his head steady, kept his grades high, and filled the margins of his notebooks with small sketches of bridges, houses, and parks with better lights. He wanted to become an architect one day. Not because buildings were beautiful, though some were, but because he liked the idea of making places where people could enter without feeling watched. That afternoon, before Lily began coughing near the pond, Elijah had been working through a page of long division, his pencil moving slowly because he liked getting every line clean. He had packed half a peanut butter sandwich in wax paper, a bottle of water, and a library book about the Golden Gate Bridge. Nothing about him was dangerous. Nothing about him was hidden. He was just a boy in a gray hoodie, waiting for his grandmother, trying to finish his homework before the sun went down. But now Patricia Whitmore was looking at him as if she had found a threat, not a child. Elijah could feel every stare gathering around his skin like heat, and still, he kept the pink backpack lifted carefully in both hands, because Lily's medicine was inside, and Lily was still trying to breathe. Patricia Whitmore had always believed Riverside Park belonged to people like her, even though the city paid for the grass, the benches, the walking trail, and the little pond where children tossed breadcrumbs to ducks on Sunday mornings. Her townhouse sat on Ashford Lane, less than half a mile from the park, behind trimmed hedges and a black iron gate that clicked shut with a sound as final as a judge ending a case. From her kitchen window, she could see the tops of the oak trees, and over the years she had come to treat them as part of her property, part of the quiet order she believed money had earned her. She chaired the neighborhood safety committee, sent long emails about suspicious activity, complained when teenagers played music too loudly near the basketball court, and posted warnings online whenever she saw someone she decided did not fit. Her words were always polished. She never called herself cruel. She called herself cautious. She never said she was afraid of black children. She said the neighborhood was changing. She never admitted she looked at Elijah and saw danger before she saw his age. She simply lifted her chin, tightened her grip on her phone, and told herself she was protecting her family. Lily Whitmore was 6 years old, small for her age, with a pink backpack covered in glitter stars and a medical tag clipped to the front zipper. Patricia loved the child in the way some people love fragile things, by holding them too tightly and trusting no one else to come near. She had promised her daughter that she would watch Lily for the afternoon, take her to the park, buy her a strawberry popsicle from the stand near the tennis courts, and bring her home before dinner. But Patricia also loved being seen. So when another mother from the neighborhood called to ask about the upcoming homeowners' meeting, Patricia turned away from the playground, stepped toward the picnic tables, and began talking about parking permits, broken streetlights, and how the park needed better supervision. Behind her, Lily wandered toward the pond path, coughing softly at first, then harder. Elijah noticed before Patricia did. That was the truth Patricia did not yet want. Now, as she stood near the rubber play mat with her designer sunglasses pushed into her silver blonde hair, she looked less like a frightened grandmother and more like someone furious that the world had not obeyed her version of events. Her white linen blouse moved gently in the breeze. Her gold bracelet caught the sunlight each time she pointed. Around her, parents watched with the quiet discomfort of people who sensed something was wrong but were waiting for someone else to say it first. Patricia kept speaking into the phone, giving the dispatcher Elijah's height, his hoodie, his race, and the color of the backpack, but not the way Lily had reached for him, not the inhaler in his hand, not the fact that Elijah had backed away the moment Patricia arrived. She left out every detail that made him human. Elijah heard enough to understand. He was not being described as a boy. He was being built into a suspect, word by word, in the middle of a park where he had only tried to help. Before the first patrol car turned onto Maple Avenue, before the blue lights touched the edge of the park, the truth was still lying in plain sight for anyone willing to look at it. Lily Whitmore sat on the rubber play mat with both knees pulled close, her small chest rising in short, uneven pulls while Elijah stood several feet away because Patricia had ordered him not to come any closer. He wanted to tell someone exactly what had happened, but every time he opened his mouth, Patricia talked over him with the fast, polished certainty of an adult used to being believed. So Elijah held his breath and replayed the moment in his mind, not because he doubted himself, but because he needed to stay calm enough to remember every detail. He had heard Lily first near the pond path, not crying, not calling for help, but coughing in a way that made the air itself sound trapped. The ducks had scattered from the edge of the water. A red popsicle lay melting on the pavement beside her shoes. Lily had been bent forward with one hand pressed to her throat, and the other reaching weakly toward the glittery pink backpack she had dropped beside a bench. Elijah had seen that look before. His cousin Marcus got the same frightened shine in his eyes when his asthma tightened around him, as if the whole world had become a room with no doors. Elijah had not run because he wanted attention. He ran because no one else had moved. He stopped a few feet from Lily, kept his hands visible, and asked, "Are you having trouble breathing?" Lily nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "My inhaler," she whispered, pointing at the backpack. Elijah looked around for Patricia, for any parent, any adult, anyone who could take over, but the closest grown-ups were too far away, turned toward their own conversations, their own strollers, their own phones. He remembered what Marcus's mother always said during emergencies. Slow voice. Clear hands. No panic. Elijah crouched beside the backpack without touching Lily. "Which pocket?" he asked. Lily tapped the front zipper with 2 fingers. He opened it carefully, found the small blue inhaler beside a pack of tissues and a folded allergy card, and placed it in her hand. When her fingers shook too much to hold it steady, he asked, "Do you want me to help you count?" She nodded again. He counted softly, one breath, then another, his voice low enough not to scare her. He moved her backpack behind her so she could sit upright, then used his own notebook to fan a little air toward her face. When she started to breathe more evenly, he told her, "You are doing good. Just keep looking at the trees." That was when Patricia finally turned around. She did not see the first cough. She did not see Lily point to the pocket. She did not hear Elijah count. She only saw a black boy near her granddaughter, her pink backpack open beside him, and her fear rushed in faster than the truth. Now Elijah looked down at the inhaler in his palm and wished the world gave children time to explain before deciding what kind of story they belonged in. The patrol car arrived with a low roll of tires over the curbside gravel, its lights flashing silently against the trunks of the oak trees. The sound did not have to be loud to change the air. Parents who had been pretending not to watch turned fully now. Children stopped climbing. A woman near the swings pulled her toddler into her lap. Elijah felt the park shrink around him until there seemed to be no grass, no pond, no sky, only the narrow space between his sneakers and the officer stepping out of the car. Officer Daniel Reed was in his late 30s, tall, calm-faced, with one hand resting near his belt and the other lifted slightly as he approached, not threatening, but official enough to make Elijah's stomach tighten. Patricia moved toward him before he could ask a question. "Thank goodness," she said, her voice trembling in a way that sounded practiced. "That boy had my granddaughter's backpack. I found him standing over her. She was crying. I told him not to move." Officer Reed looked from Patricia to Lily, then to Elijah. His eyes settled on the inhaler in the boy's hand. "Son," he said evenly, "I need you to place that on the ground for me." Elijah nodded. He bent slowly and set the inhaler on the rubber mat beside Lily's backpack, careful not to make any sudden movement, careful not to look angry, careful not to look afraid, because he had learned that people sometimes misread both. "I was helping her breathe," he said. His voice came out smaller than he wanted. Patricia turned sharply. "Do not lie." The words struck harder because of how easily she said them. Elijah looked at Lily, hoping she would speak, but the little girl had her face pressed into Patricia's side now, overwhelmed by the voices, the flashing lights, the circle of strangers. Officer Reed asked Elijah to step back toward the bench. Elijah obeyed. His notebook still lay open in the grass, pages fluttering, long division problems half finished in neat pencil rows. A boy from the basketball court whispered something to his friend. Someone else lifted a phone. Elijah saw the black glass of the camera pointed in his direction and felt heat rise behind his eyes. He imagined the video online by dinner, imagined classmates seeing it, imagined people who never knew him deciding what had happened from 10 seconds of silence. Patricia kept talking. He should not have been near her. Children are not safe when people like that are hanging around alone. The sentence landed across the park and stayed there. Officer Reed's jaw tightened, but he said nothing yet. Elijah stared at the ground. The rubber mat smelled like warm plastic under the sun. A drop of melted strawberry popsicle had dried near Lily's shoe. His hands wanted to shake, so he folded them together and held them still. "My grandmother is coming soon," he said quietly. "She works at the laundry on Benton Street. She knows I come here after school." Patricia gave a short, disbelieving breath. "Of course there is always a story." Elijah lifted his eyes then, not to challenge her, not to plead, but because something inside him refused to disappear completely. Around them, the park had gone silent in the worst way, the kind of silence that waits to see whether a child will be believed. Officer Reed asked everyone to give the boy some room, but the circle only loosened by a few inches. It was enough for air to pass through, not enough for Elijah to feel free. He stood beside the bench with his backpack still on one shoulder, the strap cutting softly into the gray cotton of his hoodie. The sun had slipped behind a patch of thin clouds, and the whole park seemed to dim at once, as if even the afternoon did not want to look directly at what was happening. A page from Elijah's notebook lifted from the grass and tumbled across the rubber mat. It landed near Patricia's white sneaker, covered in pencil numbers and one small drawing of a bridge in the corner. She glanced down at it, then away, as if homework could not belong to the kind of child she had already invented. Elijah wanted to pick it up, but he stayed still. Officer Reed had not told him he could move. That was the hardest part, not the questions, not the staring, not even Patricia's voice cutting through him again and again. It was the standing still. It was knowing that one wrong motion, one frustrated breath, one tear falling at the wrong time, could be turned into another reason not to believe him. He fixed his eyes on the oak tree where he had been sitting before everything changed. His pencil was still there beneath the bench. His water bottle leaned against the root. Half of his peanut butter sandwich waited in wax paper, flattened from his backpack, ordinary and small and suddenly far away. He thought of his grandmother's hands pressing warm shirts under fluorescent lights, her wedding ring worn thin from years of work, her voice in the kitchen every morning before school. Never let someone else's fear decide the shape of your soul. Elijah breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth. He counted the way he had counted for Lily. 1, 2, 3. The same calm he had offered her, he now tried to offer himself. Lily had stopped crying, but her eyes kept returning to him from behind Patricia's arm. There was something in her face that made Elijah ache more than the accusation did. She looked confused, as if she had watched kindness become trouble and could not understand why the adults were allowing it. Officer Reed crouched near the inhaler without touching it, reading the label, then looking at the medical tag clipped to Lily's backpack. His expression changed by a fraction. Not enough for the crowd to notice, but Elijah saw it. The officer was starting to listen to the objects, because the people had made too much noise. A soft wind moved over the pond. The swings creaked behind them. Somewhere near the tennis courts, the ice cream cart bell rang once, bright and lonely. Patricia folded her arms and whispered that this was taking too long. Elijah lowered his gaze again, not because he was ashamed, but because he refused to let her see how close he was to crying. He had done the right thing. He knew he had. But in that quiet stretch before the truth arrived, doing the right thing felt painfully lonely. Lily's voice came so softly at first that even Patricia did not hear it. She tugged once at the sleeve of her grandmother's blouse, then again, her small fingers tightening around the white fabric. "Grandma," she whispered. Patricia kept her eyes on Officer Reed. You need to check his bag, she said. People like this know how to hide things. The words had barely left her mouth when Lily stepped out from behind her arm. Her face was pale, her cheeks still wet, but her breathing had steadied. She looked at Elijah, then at the officer, and something clear and brave moved through her tiny frame. He saved me, she said. The park went still in a different way. Not empty. Not waiting. Listening. Patricia blinked down at her. Sweetheart, you are confused. Lily shook her head. No. I could not breathe. He got my inhaler. He counted for me. Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. He told me to look at the trees. Officer Reed turned fully toward her, lowering his voice. Lily, is that what happened? She nodded. He helped me. The sentence landed with more force than all of Patricia's accusations, because it came from the one person who had nothing to gain by saying it. Elijah did not move. He was afraid that if he moved, the moment might break. Officer Reed stood slowly and looked toward the ice cream cart near the tennis courts, where an older man in a blue apron had been watching from beside his freezer box. The man raised one hand. Officer, he called. My security camera points right at the pond path. Patricia's face tightened. That is not necessary. Officer Reed looked at her, calm but firmer now. Ma'am, it is exactly necessary. The ice cream vendor, Mr. Alvarez, walked over with a small tablet in his hand. His cart had a camera mounted under the striped umbrella because teenagers had once stolen cash from his tip jar. His fingers moved across the screen, and soon a small crowd leaned in, not too close, but close enough to see the truth unfold in silence. The video showed Lily near the pond, one hand on her chest, stumbling toward the bench. It showed Patricia turned away near the picnic tables, phone pressed to her ear. It showed Elijah lifting his head beneath the oak tree, dropping his pencil, and running across the grass. It showed him stopping at a careful distance. Waiting. Asking. Pointing to the backpack only after Lily pointed first. It showed him finding the inhaler, placing it in her hand, counting with his fingers, and sitting back on his heels so she would not feel crowded. Then it showed Patricia turning around after the danger had passed. Not before. After. No one spoke for several seconds. Even the children seemed to understand that something important had changed. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. The gold bracelet on her wrist no longer looked bright. It looked heavy. Officer Reed handed the tablet back to Mr. Alvarez and turned to Elijah. His voice softened. You did the right thing, son. Elijah looked up, and for the first time since the patrol car arrived, someone in authority was looking at him as a child, not a threat. Lily stepped closer to Patricia again, but her eyes stayed on Elijah. I am sorry, she whispered. Elijah nodded once. He did not know what to say. The truth had finally arrived, but it had come late, walking through the park on a screen while his heart was still trying to stop shaking. Officer Reed asked Patricia to step closer to the patrol car, not far enough to make a scene, but far enough that the crowd could feel the balance shift. His voice stayed professional, yet something in it had hardened. Ma'am, I need you to explain exactly what you saw before you called emergency services. Patricia pressed her lips together. A few minutes earlier, her words had moved through the park like commands. Now they came out smaller, thinner, searching for places to hide. I saw him with the backpack, she said. Officer Reed waited. And? Patricia glanced toward Lily, then toward Elijah, then toward the parents near the swings. My granddaughter was upset. Did you see him take the backpack from her? No, but it looked. Did you see him threaten her? No, but I was concerned. Did you see him do anything other than stand near her after she had trouble breathing? Patricia's face flushed, not with fear now, but with the slow burn of being seen too clearly. I was trying to protect my granddaughter. Officer Reed nodded once, then lifted his radio and requested the dispatch recording. The speaker crackled softly in the warm air, and Patricia's own voice returned to the park, sharp and certain, saying a black boy was stealing from children, saying he might be dangerous, saying officers needed to come quickly before he ran. Each word sounded different the second time. Not protective. Not careful. Heavy. Careless. Final. Elijah stood beside the bench with his hands folded in front of him, listening to a stranger's fear dressed up as fact. Mr. Alvarez looked down. A mother near the slide covered her mouth. The father with the stroller shook his head slowly, as if disappointed in himself for not stepping forward sooner. Then, one by one, the silence around Elijah began to change shape. A woman in a green tennis visor stepped forward and said she had seen Elijah at the park all summer, helping younger children cross the bike path. A teenage boy from the basketball court said Elijah had returned his lost wallet 2 weeks ago with $23 still inside. Mr. Alvarez cleared his throat and said Elijah picked up trash near the pond most afternoons without being asked. The truth did not come all at once. It came in small human pieces, handed forward by people who had known enough to speak earlier and had waited too long. Patricia looked trapped inside the very circle she had created. Officer Reed did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Mrs. Whitmore, calling emergency services with serious claims you did not witness can put innocent people at risk. Especially children. The word children settled between them. Patricia's eyes flicked to Elijah, and for the first time, she seemed to notice his size, his school polo, the math worksheet in the grass, the boy beneath the accusation. Her shoulders dropped. I made a mistake, she whispered. But the park knew it had been more than that. Elijah knew it too. Still, when Lily reached for her backpack with unsteady fingers, Elijah picked it up from the bench, zipped the front pocket carefully around the inhaler, and handed it to Officer Reed so he could give it back. He did not look at Patricia when he did it. His kindness had already been mistaken once, and he was tired of proving that it was real. Ruth Brooks arrived at Riverside Park with her work apron still folded over one arm and the smell of warm laundry clinging to her sleeves. She had walked 3 blocks faster than her knees liked, after a neighbor from the laundromat called and said there were police lights near the playground where Elijah usually waited. When Elijah saw her, the strength he had been holding together began to loosen. He did not run. He did not cry out. He simply stood there beneath the fading afternoon light as his grandmother crossed the grass, her face tight with worry and love. Ruth looked first at Officer Reed, then at Patricia, then at the scattered worksheet near the bench. Finally, she looked at Elijah. "Baby, are you all right?" she asked. That was the first question anyone had asked him like the answer mattered. Elijah nodded once, but his eyes shined. Ruth pulled him close, one hand on the back of his hoodie, the other pressing gently between his shoulders, as if she could steady his heartbeat through the cotton. The park watched in a silence that had changed from suspicion into shame. Officer Reed explained what had happened in a low voice, careful with every word. Ruth listened without interrupting. Her mouth tightened when she heard the recording had described her grandson as dangerous before anyone had known the truth. Patricia stood a few feet away, pale now, both hands wrapped around Lily's pink backpack as if it had become heavier than she could carry. Lily stood beside her, breathing normally again, one hand resting over the front pocket where the inhaler was tucked safely inside. After Officer Reed finished, Patricia stepped forward. Her sunglasses were no longer in her hair. They hung from one hand useless. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, then stopped because Ruth's eyes made polished excuses feel small. Patricia swallowed. "Elijah, I am sorry." The words came softly, but the park heard them. Elijah looked at her for a long moment. He saw the same woman who had pointed at him, who had turned his skin into evidence, who had made strangers lift their phones while his homework blew across the grass. He also saw Lily watching him with frightened hope, too young to understand everything, but old enough to know that something unfair had happened because of her grandmother. Elijah reached down, picked up the worksheet from the grass, and smoothed it against his knee. The bridge he had drawn in the corner was creased, but not ruined. "Next time," he said quietly, "please ask what happened before you decide who someone is." Patricia lowered her eyes. No one clapped. No one cheered. Justice did not need noise in that moment. Officer Reed returned Elijah's notebook and told Ruth he would file the report properly. Mr. Alvarez brought over a fresh bottle of water and placed it near Elijah without making a speech. The mother in the green visor bent to pick up his pencil from under the bench. Small repairs moved through the park like a breeze after heat. Ruth took Elijah's hand, and together they walked toward Benton Street as the sun slid behind the townhouses on Ashford Lane. Before they reached the sidewalk, Elijah turned once toward Lily. "Can she breathe okay now?" he asked his grandmother, though Patricia could hear him. Ruth looked back at the little girl, then squeezed Elijah's hand. "Yes, baby," she said. "She can breathe." Elijah nodded and kept walking. Behind him, Patricia remained beside the playground, holding the backpack she had once mistaken for proof. The swings moved gently in the evening wind, empty and creaking. The oak tree threw a long shadow across the grass where a boy had been judged too quickly and still chosen kindness. And for the first time all afternoon, Riverside Park was quiet enough for everyone left behind to hear what shame sounded like.